Hi, everybody. I am the Reverend Carol Bedeau, and I am privileged to serve Westside UU Church as minister. Today, Sunday, October 25th, we're talking about what it means to bear witness, to be present in times of tumult and difficulty. Today, we're talking about how to really pay attention before we act or react. So today, I invite you to take a deep breath. I'm going to invite the bowl to sound just as a way to kind of call us present. And then we're going to share some thoughts about bearing witness. It's a time right now when there's a lot going on in our world, a lot of struggle and strife, a lot of conflict, and a lot of divisiveness. And it can be hard in that situation to know how to respond. Right now, there's an awful lot of difference being focused on, people who disagree and the differences between us, a lot of conflict, a lot of emphasis for all of us, no matter where we are politically or religiously or philosophically, a lot of focus on how we are not unified. Now, in the face of such tumult, how do we act in a way that creates positive, beneficial ripples in the world? How do we contribute to the common good and a greater sense of harmony and peace? What's the best way to respond to all that energy of strife and disagreement? More often than not, our responses are really not responses, but rather reactions. More often, we respond directly and immediately out of our fear, our anger, our powerlessness, or our sense of blame and judgment. When faced with strong disagreement about things that we really value and that are important to us, it's easy to come from a really strong negative place of reactivity. But as most of us probably know already, that's usually not the most effective way to respond, and it can have some pretty negative consequences. So, what are our alternatives? The way I see it, there's a spectrum of responses that we might have. Now, on the one hand, there is this reactivity, strong anger and negative emotion or despair. And that can lead to actions like violent speech, judgment, aggressive behavior. It might make us say, I'm never going to talk to you again, to end relationships. Or on the other hand, it might make us become incredibly passive. I give up. There's nothing I can do. I give up. I'm just going to sit back and let it all happen. There are times when we want to just opt out. And sometimes taking a break is a good idea, but passivity is a little bit different. So we can be reactive, we can be passive, but we can also move beyond that into something else. Taoism refers to an alternative that I value. They call it Wu Wei. This is often described as non-action, but it's really not the same as passivity. As the phrase non-action implies just doing nothing, but it's really different than that. Wu Wei really means consciously choosing to not act at this moment. Elizabeth Reininger describes Wu Wei with these words. Wu Wei refers to the cultivation of a state of being in which our actions are quite effortlessly in alignment with the ebb and flow of the elemental cycles of the world. It's a kind of going with the flow that's characterized by ease and awareness, in which, without trying, we're able to respond perfectly to whatever situation arises. Now, in Taoism, the ability to practice Wu Wei is actually considered the highest of virtues. To be in utter alignment with what is, to accept it without being passive and hopeless, or without being angry and reactive, but rather to be open, present, and curious. So, how does that sound? It sounds great, right? I personally love this concept, and practicing it is a challenge. You can hear it sometimes when you might have heard me say before in other sermons or conversations, well, that's fascinating. That's interesting. What are the tools we can use, like curiosity, to cultivate this kind of presence and conscious non-action? So the first one I would recommend is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. When we are uncomfortable, we have a tendency to want to do something right now. When we feel fear or anxiety or upset or anger, we want it to stop. So we want to act quickly to make things change. But sometimes the problem with that is that when we act from that place, we generate consequences that we don't like. We don't really take the time to consider the repercussions of our behavior. So we might look back and say, well, I wish I had. Getting comfortable with discomfort means choosing to not act, but instead simply sit with that discomfort. It's not the same as ignoring what's upsetting us at all. In fact, it's actually becoming more aware of the feeling of being upset, rolling it around in our thoughts, noticing our habits, paying attention. Sometimes, often, this will help to soften those feelings. It may uncover other feelings that are hiding beneath that. So, the first strategy is to just be okay with being uncomfortable. A second strategy that can be helpful is one that a friend gave me many years ago when I was struggling. He said, don't run away from a situation you don't like. Be still until you know what you want to move towards. And this is an important distinction. We have a tendency to want to get away from that feeling as quickly as possible or that situation, but often we aren't really sure where we're headed. So it's important to be still until we know where we want to go. And a third tool is a piece of wisdom from the late singer John Denver. He said this: there are so many things that need to be done. Sometimes it seems overwhelming. I try to remind everyone that no one person has to do it all. But if each one of us follows our heart and our inclinations, we'll find the small things that we can do that we enjoy, that together will come up together to create a sustainable and healthy future. Now, the gist of this message is that when we feel struck down by the despair of the world, overwhelmed by how much there is to do, we can remember two things. First, we can't do everything, but we can do something. We do have power. And second, we are most powerful when we do that which brings us joy. If we are trying to do things that exhaust us and make us upset, we will not be able to sustain that. But if we do things that actually feel good to us as we do them, we will be able to sustain that in a way that makes a difference. Now, in order to practice all these skills, we have to have patience. But we have to have something even more important than patience, something that goes beyond patience. It's not just a matter of sitting still and holding our breath and waiting. We are actively, consciously choosing to be still and witness what is happening. We are witnessing both inside and outside of ourselves. We are witnessing our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own habits, our own impulses, and our own behaviors. And if we do that, if we bear witness to ourselves, often we also gain the capacity to bear witness to others, to notice more deeply what are their thoughts, what are their feelings, what are their impulses, what are their habits, where are they coming from? Buddhist nun and teacher Pema Chodron puts it this way: the basic ground of compassionate action is the importance of working with rather than against. And what I mean by that, what she says she means by that, is working with your own unwanted, unacceptable stuff. So that when the unwanted and unacceptable appears out there, separate from you, you relate to it based on having worked with the loving kindness inside yourself. Then there's no condescension. This non-dualistic approach is true to the heart because it's based on our kinship with one another. We know what to say because we've experienced closing down or shutting off or being angry or hurt or rebellious, so forth. We have experienced those things, and we've made a relationship with them inside ourselves so that we can greet the other with compassion. In other words, to practice Wu Wei, to practice conscious non-action, to bear witness to what is happening inside and outside of ourselves, this can bring us to a place of greater compassion and ultimately action that is more effective because it is striving to create harmony rather than division. It helps us remember that those people out there who are different than us are really not the enemy. They may see us as the enemy, but we're really all striving for the same thing. And in fact, we're often actually behaving from the same emotions. Ultimately, we're all in this together. We are all on the same planet. We all have to work together. Now, this does not mean having no boundaries. And it does not mean failing to act for our values at all. It does not mean stepping aside and saying, I'm going to just let it be. Whatever happens, happens. It means inspired action, action based in a deep presence, a deep awareness of what's going on, a deep compassion for the situation, an action that is guided towards what we know we want to create. Not a rejection of what we don't like, but a choosing of what we do believe in. If nothing else, coming from this perspective, this willingness to wait until we feel that, it helps us avoid aggressive or reactive behavior that will make things worse, that will increase disharmony and division. So now, as we have a little over a week left, as we approach the election here in the United States, I would encourage you to consider practicing Wu Wei. Just try it out. Encourage you to pause in the midst of whatever strong feelings you may be having, whatever adamant beliefs or aggressive thoughts you may be having, regardless of your political position, your religious affiliation, or your philosophical stance. Just take a moment to ask yourself, what if I just sit still with this? Practice that. Ask yourself from an open mind, what's really happening here? Is there more information that might be useful to me? Is there another perspective that if I could understand it, I would be more compassionate? What's going on for the other person? This is designed to help us find what we have in common, not where we disagree. How can we move towards harmony rather than away from it? I would invite you to have some faith in the possibility that from this place, your actions will be inspired, that your actions will not be reactive or passive, but instead inspired towards the highest good of all. I hope that you feel empowered. I hope that you know that there is a place of peace within you. And I hope that you know that you matter and your values are important. We all have a place in this great tapestry of life. We all have meaning, and we are all inherently valuable. Take time to notice that in yourselves, and when you can, notice it in everyone else, no matter where they are. I hope that you have a week filled with peace. At Westside, regardless of whether the chalice is lit or extinguished, the light of truth, the fire of commitment, and the warmth of community go with us at all times. Go in peace.